Flowing on.
Okay, everybody, we are live on the YouTubes and some other places.
Oh, shoot.
Woohoo!
We're
Are we
in.
doing cool hats? I'm going to do a cool hat.
Do I need a cool hat?
Cool hats are always welcome.
I could go get my cool hat.
All right, so, if you didn't catch it from the description of this video, we're doing the old classic hangout style of making art and reading to each other and chit-chatting. So I'm going to post in the YouTube chat the link for people that might want to come up here, but be aware, we got to have a little bit of management because it's only 10 on screen at once. So we may have to rotate people in or out depending on how popular this goes, but I think this is going to be cool.
It's going to be fun. I cross-posted a couple of other artsy
Hi, Jenny.
places. Jenny.
All right. Yeah, Jen's all set up. We got a jerry-rigged camera for her to show her painting. She's going to paint some rocks, I think. Always a good time. I am rusty as heck. This is an old project that I never quite finished, and so I'm going to see how it goes, adding some color to it.
I think I can get it. Yeah. Okay.
And also, I might just bibliomancy from my favorite book that I've still not finished, Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins. That might be a good place to start. Yeah. Always a good time. Gabe, you got any books on the stack for reading to me while I color?
Yeah, I think a good first read will be to kind of initiate the symposium.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I'll go very far. I'll just get us into the connection seems a little sketchy right now. I'm going to back out and come back in.
All right, man. Okay, I'll kick off some reading then. Okay, this is total bibliomancy, just starting from a random page. Oh, page 314. Perfect. It's Pi Day. Oh, snap.
Yo.
Okay, cool. We got Jazz. What's up, Jazz?
I'm driving irresponsibly.
You gonna go do some wire wraps while we flow state, dude?
I'm on my way to the farm right now. I'm gonna do some a little bit of landscaping, and then I'm gonna take Chief on a kayak walk.
Sounds fun. Cool,
oh, yeah.
man. So what we're doing here, we're making art and gonna read from some random parts of some random books. It's gonna be a good time.
Sweet. I'll stay on as long as I can.
Okay, cool. We might rotate people in and out because of the 10-person limit, so we'll see how it goes with the new people joining. Sarah says, I'm crocheting a funky 70s style dress. That's pretty cool. Happy to see everybody here in the chat.
That's super exciting, Sarah. I want to see it in the art party on Telegram.
Okay. Gabe, how you doing? All right, I'm going to do some reading. This is page 314 of Anacalypsis, Volume 1. I'll read for a while, then I'm going to call on somebody else, probably Gabe. The identity of the Holy Virgin of the Christians and of that of the Gentiles had been observed before Monsieur Dupois' time. Albert the Great says that the sign of the Celestial Virgin rises above the horizon at the moment in which we fix the birth of the Lord Jesus Christ. All the mysteries of his divine incarnation and all the secrets of his miraculous life, from his conception even to his ascension, are traced in the constellations and figured in the stars which announced them. For a more detailed proof of the assertion of Albert, the reader may consult Dupois. Bochart says that Leo X gave the Virgin Mary the title of goddess. Peyotier, as noted before, has observed that more than 100 years before the Christian era, in the territory of Chartres, among the Gauls, honors were paid to the Virgin Parature, who was about to give birth to the god of light. That this was really the Buddhist worship, I have no doubt. The Virgin was the beautiful Maya, the mother of Buddha, and Budwas was found in Wales, as noticed in my book Celtic Druids. Adonis, the Syrian god, was the son of Mira. This Mira was feigned to be changed into a tree of the same name, with it, the myrrh tree, consecrated by the eastern nations to the sun. This was what was offered by the Magi to Christ at his birth. The trifling but still striking coincidences between the worship of the God soul and the stories of Jesus are innumerable. Kircher, the Jesuit, gives an astrological account of the 7 planets of the 12 signs of the zodiac, of the 36 deacons into which the 12 signs were divided, and day 48 asterismus, sive mansionibus deorum antitecanon. In the latter of, this was in Latin and Greek, in the latter of which has the words in medio autem horum numinum, mithram, quem et mesitin hoc est mediatorum ponehant id est solem. He afterwards has the following heading to a chapter, page 200, dispositio iconismorum, cua Egypti ex mente aveneris, signorum dodecatomeria, in tres fascies subdiviserunt singulisque facibus appropriatas imagines attribuerant, in which is this passage. Okay, this is a giant paragraph in Latin, so we're going to skip ahead. You got to go translate these when you read this book. He just assumes everybody knows how to speak Latin and Greek. Mr. Faber says Jesus was not originally called Jesus Christ, but Jesqua Hamasia. Jesqua is the same as Joshua and Jesus and means Savior. And Ham is evidently the Om of India, the Aman, and Messiah is the Anointed. It will then be the Savior Om, the Anointed, precisely as Isaiah had literally foretold, or reading in the Hebrew mode, the Anointed Om, the Savior. This was the name of Jesus of Bethlehem. The name of Jesus also was Jesus ben Panther. Jesus was a very common name with the Jews. Stukely observes that the patronymic of Jesus Christ was Panther, and that panthers were the nurses and bringers up of Bacchus, and adds, "'Tis remarkable that Panther was the surname of Joseph's family, our Lord's foster father. They're bringing this up in the public right now with the whole Last Supper outrage, and then they go and claim that it's actually Bacchus, not the Last Supper.
I got something. Am I coming through?
Yeah, buddy.
Also, in Native American parlance, the sky panther refers to eclipses. And after the French Fandango, there was a blackout. So there is something of a strong correspondence to the biblical overlay of the panther, the eclipse, and the blackout after the ritual. And in terms of sex magic, the blackout is very functionally appropriate. You get done doing the deed, it's time to go to sleep.
Yeah, and what happens after a big bacchanalian feast like the one that they're claiming? You get blacked out. Blackout, Bacchus drunk. Okay. Thus the Midrash Koheleth, or gloss, upon Ecclesiastes. It happened that a serpent bit R. Elisar ben Dama, and James, a man of the village Secania, came, man, the print is so bad right here, came to hold him in the name of Jesus ben Panther. This is likewise in the book called Abadazara, where the comment upon it says, this James was a disciple of Jesus the Nazarene. Here, in this accidental notice of Jesus by these two Jewish works, is a direct and unexceptionable proof of his existence. It is unexceptionable because if it not be the evidence of unwilling witnesses, it is the evidence of disinterested ones. On this I shall have occasion to say more hereafter. No one will doubt the piety of Dr. Stukely. The similarity of the circumstances related of Jesus and Bacchus could not be denied, and therefore he accounts for it by supposing that God had revealed to the heathen part of what was to happen in the future. This may be satisfactory to some persons, as it was no doubt to the doctor. The accidental manner in which the assertion is made that the father of Jesus was called Panther removes the possibility of accounting for it by attributing it to the malice of the Jews. In a former chapter, it has been proved that Bacchus was mistaken by the Romish priests for Jesus. Here the reader sees that the pious Dr. Stukely has proved, as might be expected, that the mother of Bacchus is the same person as the mother of Jesus, Mary. And as the persons who brought up Jesus were called panthers, the name of an animal, so Bacchus was brought up by the same kind of animal, a panther. When the reader reflects that the whole Roman Christian doctrine is founded, as the Roman Church admits, on tradition, he will have no difficulty in accounting for the similarity of the systems. The circumstances of Joseph's family name being supposed to be Panther is remarkably confirmed by Epiphanius, who says that Joseph was the brother of Cleophas, the son of James, surnamed Panther. Thus we have the fact both from Jewish and Christian authorities. It is very clear that Bacchus's Panther must have been copied from that of Jesus, or IHS, Iota Eta Sigma, or that of Jesus from Bacchus's. I leave the matter with my reader. So if you guys are just tuning in, the goal is that while we're reading to you and we're making art here on screen, that you guys find something to create where you're at. And I have a pinned comment in the YouTube chat of how to join in if you want to show us what you're working on or you want to read something to us. I'd love to popcorn over to somebody.
I got a little something. That was Jim Maiden, wasn't it? Who was in with us there? Jazz?
Oh, that was Jazz.
Oh, it looked like Jim Maiden. I invited Jim if he wanted to join us, but I guess he isn't here. I thought that was Jim. But I just want to give thanks to Jim Maiden and give congratulations to the Maiden family as they're having a baby too pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know
the whole flow state concept is a Jim Maiden baby itself.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I just wanted to give honorable mention to the granddaddy of granddaddies who's about to be a new daddy. So big
Yeah,
love and
buddy.
respect to Jim. Yeah.
Blessings upon the house of Maiden. Okay, I'm going to read a little more. Then I'm going to popcorn to you, Gabe. The worship of the Virgin was in no sense applicable to Mary, the wife of Joseph. If this worship had been originally derived from her or instituted in her honor, she would not have been called a virgin as a distinguishing mark of honor. For she was no more a virgin than any other woman who had a large family. For such a family, after the birth of Jesus, it cannot be denied that, according to the gospel accounts, she had. Therefore, why, more than other women, should she be called a virgin? The truth is that the worship of the Virgin and Child, which we find in all Romish countries, was nothing more than a remnant of the worship of Isis and the god Horus, the Virgin of the celestial sphere, to whom the epithet virgin, though a mother, was without absurdity applied. I know very well what the devotees have said to conceal the fact of the Virgin's family, but it is all answered at once by the observation that, if James, etc., were the children of Joseph by a former wife, they were not brothers of Jesus, but half-brothers. They are totally different things. But what folly there is in all this! Is there anything wrong in a married woman having a family? It is well known that almost all the Oriental nations, the Hindus, the Persians, the Syrians, the Arabians, the Egyptians, the Copts, and I believe the Jews, in their astrology, had a lunar zodiac divided into 28 parts, elusive to the days in the moon's period, called the mansions of the moon. Over each of these divisions, a genius or daemon presided. There can be no doubt that it was the same system in all these nations, and probably the doctrines held respecting it may have been originally the same in each of them, although it may not be possible to demonstrate this by a rigorous proof. But for the sake of argument, I shall consider them the same. The access to these mansions was supposed to be by the Milky Way, as it was called by the Greeks and Romans, who, not understanding it, as usual, invented a story of their own to account for it. It was said to have the name of milky from its whiteness, which was caused by the accidental spilling on the ground of some of the milk of Juno. But the original Oriental name was the Strawy Way, via Stramenis, Seu, Pali, and was thus called from an astronomical allegory of the celestial virgin, who, fleeing from the evil principle Typhon, by the way, this would be Virgo next to Hydra, let fall some of the ears of corn, or corn in the straw, which she carried in one of her hands. This celestial virgin was feigned to be a mother. She is represented in the Indian zodiac of Sir William Jones with ears of corn in one hand and the lotus in the other. In Kircher's zodiac of Hermes, she has corn in both hands. In other planispheres of the Egyptian priests, she carries ears of corn in one hand and the infant Horus in the other. In Roman Catholic countries, she is generally represented with the child in one hand and the lotus or lily in the other. This Milky Way is placed immediately under that degree of north latitude, which is called the Tropic of Cancer, and the two tropics of Cancer and Capricorn have been called by the astrologers the gates of heaven, or the sun, at each of which the sun arrives in his annual progress. The reasons why these two lines were called the gates was this: they were boundaries to the north and the south, beyond which the sun never extended his course. The space between them might be called the dominion of the sun, and when you passed into the space between them, you might be said to pass into his kingdom. The southern gate is called the Tropic of Capricorn, an amphibious animal, half goat, half fish, in our present zodiacs. But in the most ancient zodiacs of India, it is described as two entire beings, a goat and a fish. The Brahmins also call the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn the gates of the sun. Kircher, in his Oedipus Egypticus, has undertaken to give us the names of the daemons, or genii, who presided over each of the lunar mansions, and the meanings of these names. The sincerity of the learned old Jesuit cannot be doubted, though some of his etymologies may. He states that the first is called the gate of the fish. This evidently alludes to the Indian sign of Capricorn and is very satisfactory. The 13th is called the station of love by the Egyptians or Copts, by the Arabs, the Al-Zarfet, or that which takes away cold, and by the Greeks and Romans, the ear of corn. Of this, Cicero says, Spicum illustrium tenens splendenti corpore Virgo. Kircher says, Incipit hac statio e quarter virginis, et terminatur in 18º gradu eiusdam dodecatomori virginis. Genius es Masail, statio pacis et unionis conjugalis. The following passage is from Sir William Drummond's Oedipus Judaicus. Then he starts with the Hebrew word Heshman, which is He, Shen, Mem, Vav, Nun. It is clear that the letters in this name have been transposed and probably for a mysterious purpose. In the onomasticon, the word Heshman is brought from MSH, and even the English reader will easily see that this is only a transposition of the radicals He, Shen, Mem, Vav, Nun. The Jews, in fact, pretend that one Messiah, MSIH, was to be born of the tribe of Judah and another to the tribe of Ephraim. This Heshman seems to indicate him who was the anointed of Judah and who indeed is called Ben Yehuda, Judah's son. Let us inquire if there be any astronomical allusion here. Again, he says, immediately on leaving the sign of Leo, the emblem of Judah, the sun passes into the sign where, as we have already seen, the ancient Persians, Arabians, and Syrians depicted Virgo with a male infant in her arms. Now I observe that the Arabians make Mesail, the protecting genius, in the sign of Virgo. This Mesail seems a manifest corruption from the Messiah El. It is vain to talk of the shin being dagashed by the Masoretes, or of the aspirate being suppressed. We ourselves suppress the sound of the aspirate in Eve, Messiah, and many other words. Besides, the Syrians certainly often softened the harsh aspirate, and the Arabians may have caught the sound from them. Messiah El, then, appears to be a corruption of Mem, Shen, Yad. Mem, super tiny print. Mem, Shen, Yad, Chet, Aleph, Lamed. Messiah El, the anointed of El, the male infant, who rises in the arms of Virgo, who was called Jesus by the Hebrews. That is, Iso, Yod, Vav, Shin, Ayin, ISO, the Savior, and was hailed the anointed king or Messiah. When it is considered that this Heshman and the whole of the towns specified in this passage of Joshua are part of the allotment given to the tribe of Judah, it can scarcely be doubted that a close connection with the Christian Messiah will be found here. Sir William Drummond has shown that all the names of the other places which are certainly understood have an allegorical meaning elusively to the heavenly bodies. It must also be recollected that these astrological circumstances preceded the birth of Jesus Christ. All right, well, that's a chapter end. And go wrap it up there, see what everyone's up to.
Just wanted to say hi. Happy Friday, everybody. And congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Maiden. And we love you. And we miss you, Jazz. And hi, Stacey.
Hi, Jen.
Good to see you guys.
This is so fun. I'm glad we brought this back.
Right?
Yes, I've missed this.
Hi, Gabe.
Hi, Jen. It's so great to hear your voice. I'm so happy for you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Are you painting stones?
I'm painting some black rocks.
Wow. Oh, that's what's up. That's what I call power reappropriating.
We did,
Mhm.
right? We did. My
Mhm.
parents came to visit, and this was one my mom did, and this was the one Chance did. Where's the camera?
So cool.
Right? And it totally gets you into like a hypnotic flow state. So I thought that doing a couple of these would be cool.
Super
That's so
fantastic.
magical. You know, one of the gifts that Dylan and Chance have blessed me with is the concept of hypochorism, is words that over time get rounded out and they lose their edges from how we use them so much. And another term for that is a pet stone. And over time,
Mm.
the word, its meaning actually takes on sometimes opposite uh,
Uh-huh.
a functionality in the society. And it's funny because we reverse our tone over the pet rocks that are like a river stone. So the river stone and the hypochorism to me is embodied very much when we reverse tone like a river stone on the words that we associate to. That's so powerful.
That's awesome. Hyperchorism.
I like that.
Is it hyper or hypo?
Oh, I was just
I think it's-
confirming. You tell me.
I think it's hyper, and I think there's evidence to suggest that they happen more to cultures that have been through civil wars, whether literally or figuratively.
Yes.
We've done that a few times.
Yeah. As soon as I learned about that, the first example I came to my mind is the word overseer. You know, the overseer was the guy cracking the whip in the field. It's the last person you want to come and presume to be of assistance. And sure enough, today, when we have an accident out on the road, it's the first person you're required to call upon is the officers. And so in a fun and fascinating way, the overseer became the officer after the Civil Wars.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm just going to get into a couple stations and the Plato Symposium. At the house of Agathon. Concerning things about which you ask to be informed, I believe that I am not ill prepared with an answer. For the day before yesterday, I was coming from my own home at Phalerum to the city, and one of my acquaintance, who had caught a sight of me from behind, called out playfully in the distance, said, Apollodorus, O thou Phalarion man, halt! The word Phalarion is likely a play on the word bald-headed, which was the nickname of my capoeira instructor in Boulder. Old Larry Stevenson, his capoeira name was Careca, old baldy. Halt! So I did as I was bid, and then he said, I was looking for you, Apollodorus, only just now that I might ask you about the speeches in praise of love, which were delivered by Socrates, Alcibiades, and others at Agathon's supper. Phoenix, the son of Philip, which is beautiful because Phoenix and Pegasus are collateral on the zodiac as minor decans, told another person who told me of them his narrative was very indistinct, but he said that you knew, and I wish that you would give me an account of them. Who, if not you, should be the reporter of the words of your friends? And first tell me, he said, were you present at this meeting? Your informant, Glaucon, I said, must have been very indistinct indeed if you imagine that the occasion was recent, or that I could have been of the party. Why, yes, he replied, I thought so. Impossible, said I. Are you ignorant that for many years Agathon has not resided in Athens, and not 3 have elapsed since I became acquainted with Socrates, and have made it my daily business to know all that he says and does? There was a time when I was running about the world, fancying myself to be well employed, but I was really a most wretched being, no better than you are now. I thought that I ought to do anything rather than be a philosopher. Well, he said, jesting apart, tell me when the meeting occurred. In your boyhood, I replied, when Agathon won the prize with his first tragedy. On the day after that, on which he and his chorus offered the sacrifice of victory. Editorial note: I ponder what the sacrifice of victory that a tragedian master playwright might entail in those days. Rachel! Big love and respect.
Hi, Rachel!
So much love, you guys. It's good to see you.
Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Stacy. Ooh, love all these projects.
So happy to see you.
Sorry, were you going to start reading?
So later in the reading, that avoidance of the avoidance of that day of sacrifice. Oh wow, wow. Yes, yes, yes. It's a
Whoa.
stone of Dendara.
Oh my gosh, it looks so good from the little tiny screen, but it looks so good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying too. That is really cool. So cool.
I love the
Woohoo,
scent of
Stitchery!
beautiful scent of place.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yes, there seems to have been other participants of the party who it's implied that they also avoided Agathon's victory sacrifice. And so I think that those in the know could say much more about why his victorious sacrifice party was actually dodged by certain characters. Yeah, just a footnote because it does come up later. Then it must have been a long while ago, he said. And who told you? Did Socrates? No, indeed, I replied. But the same person who told Phoenix, he was a little fellow who never wore any shoes, Aristodemus, of the dame of Cydathenaeum. He had been at Agathon's feast, and I think that in those days there was no one who was a more devout admirer of Socrates. Moreover, I have asked Socrates about the truth of some parts of his narrative, and he confirmed them. Then said Glaucon, let us have the tale over again. Is not the road to Athens just made for conversation? And so we walked and talked of the discourses on love. And therefore, as I said at first, I am not ill prepared to comply with your request, and will have another rehearsal of them if you like. For to speak or to hear others speak of philosophy always gives me the greatest pleasure, to say nothing of the prophet. But when I hear another strain, especially that of you rich men and traders, such conversation displeases me, and I pity you who are my companions, because you think that you are doing something when in reality you are doing nothing. And I dare say that you pity me in return, whom you regard as an unhappy creature. And very probably you are right. But I certainly know of you what you only think of me. There is the difference, his companion says. I see, Apollodorus, that you are just the same, always speaking evil of yourself and of others, and I do believe that you pity all mankind, with the exception of Socrates. Yourself, first of all, true in this to your old name, which, however deserved, I know not how you acquired of Apollodorus the madman, for you are always raging against yourself and everybody but Socrates. Uh, Another footnote. Apollodorus does have an entire history well worth looking into. He was in a famous battle with the soldiers would have cohorts that they were paired off and kind of would look after each other, almost like a married couple, but in battle. And I forget the name of his cohort, but in the heat of the battle, uh, they were commanded by the king to come back to the king. I think his cohort was sick, had an illness, and so they were seen as a weak unit and they needed to withdraw. And as they were complying to the king's order, his cohort, who was sick, uh, flipped, turned, went a little berserker, and charged into the melee and was killed. And Apollodorus was actually blamed for the death of his sick partner, and so he was given a bad moniker when he got back when the war was over. They actually blamed him, and he had it was put on his permanent record, and they gave him this nickname, Apollodorus the Madman. And then it's much later in his biography he goes and redeems himself when he goes berserk and charges into another melee attack. And then they changed his name after that, and he became it wasn't Apollodorus the Brave. It was kind of like Apollodorus the Maniac. But the slight nuance of the word was not fully honoring him. It was still keeping a little barb into his reputation. So that's our Apollodorus is our kind of our psychopomp or our spokesperson. Big up Z. Speaking of berserkers.
Oh, hey.
Hi there, Lab.
What's up, people? Who's in here? I couldn't see on my phone. I've been watching on my
I
phone.
raised my cup.
Listening, rather.
Like legit, you couldn't have timed that better.
Yeah, man. I raised my cup to you.
I see Rachel. Hi, Rachel. And I know Chance. I know Slick. And then wait, who's that with the coloring?
I can't hear you, Z.
No one can hear me? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Jenny is Mrs. Chance. Jenny is painting rocks. Rachel and Stacy are stitching. And Chance is coloring, and that's why you see the top of his head or top of his hat and his coloring pages.
Got it. Wait, you can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, it's just Slick's problem.
Yeah. He was just reading about maniacs and madmen, so it was good timing for you to pop right in.
Are you guys hearing Zaralath? I'm not picking him up.
Yeah.
I can hear him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
That's weird. Just me?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Right on. So yeah, I'm giving a little of the backstory to Apollodorus, who is kind of the psychopomp into the symposium. He's our first-hand witness account, which is really fifth or fourth hand telephone game. But okay, so Apollodorus. Yes, friend, and the reason why I am said to be mad and out of my wits is just because I have these notions of myself and of you. No other evidence is required. The companion, no more of that, Apollodorus, but let me renew my request that you would repeat the conversation. Apollodorus, well, the tale of love was on this wise, but perhaps I had better begin at the beginning and endeavor to give you the exact words of Aristodemus. He said that he met Socrates, fresh from the bath and sandaled, and as the sight of the sandals was unusual, he asked him whether he was going that he had been converted into such a beau. To a banquet at Agathon's, he replied, whose invitation to his sacrifice of victory I refused yesterday, fearing a crowd, but promising that I would come today instead. And so I have put on my finery, because he is such a fine man. What would you say to going with me unasked? I will do as you bid me, I replied. Follow then, he said. Let us demolish the proverb, to the feast of inferior men, the good unbidden go. Instead of which our proverb will run, to the feast of the good unbidden go. Having some schizophrenic fun right there. And this alteration may be supported by the authority of Homer himself, who not only demolishes, but literally outrages the proverb. For after picturing Agamemnon as the most valiant of men, he makes Menelaus, who is but a faint-hearted warrior, come unbidden to the banquet of Agamemnon, who is feasting and offering sacrifice, not the better to the worse, but the worse to the better. I rather fear, Socrates, said Aristodemus, lest this may still be my case, and that, like Menelaus and Homer, I shall be the inferior person who, to the feast of the wise, unbidden goes. But I shall say that I was bidden of you, and then you will have to make an excuse. Two going together, he replied in Homeric fashion, one or other of them may invent an excuse by the way. This was the style of their conversation as they went along. Socrates dropped behind in a fit of abstraction and desired Aristodemus, who was waiting, to go on before him. And when he reached the house of Agathon, he found the doors wide open, and a comical thing happened. A servant, coming out to meet him, and led him at once to the banquet hall in which the guests were reclining, for the banquet was about to begin. Welcome, Aristodemus, said Agathon, as soon as he appeared. You are just in time to sup with us. If you come on any other matter, put it off, and make one of us, as I was looking for you yesterday and meant to have asked you if I could have found you. But what have you done with Socrates? I turned around, but Socrates was nowhere to be seen, and I had to explain that he had been with me just a minute before, and that I came by his invitation to the supper. You are quite right in coming, said Agathon, but where is he himself? He was behind me just now, as I entered, he said, and I cannot think what has become of him. Go and look for him, boy, said Agathon, and bring him in. And do you, Aristodemus, meanwhile take the place by Eryximachus? The servant then assisted him to wash, and he lay down, and presently another servant came in and reported that our friend Socrates had retired onto the portico of the neighboring house, where he is fixed. he said, and when I call to him, he will not stir. How strange, said Agathon. Then you must call him again and keep calling him. Oh, let him alone, said my informant. He has a way of stopping anywhere and losing himself without any reason. I believe that he will soon appear, and do not therefore disturb him. Okay, editorial note. Socrates' demonic voice is notorious for telling him things not to do, giving him warnings in advance of what to avoid. And it's more of a PK, Socrates late to the party. What's up, bro?
Hey, what's up, everyone? Good to see you guys. Hey, this is how we get around the. We're almost at 10, huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're at 9. If you count, you see what I did there?
Looks like my.
I'm counting.
I think my
Jenny and
audio is
Rachel
late
is
to pick up.
2.
I'm talking
Congrats,
over you,
guys.
PK. I can't hear you yet,
All
but
good.
that happened with Sarah last. So it might come through in a minute. I'm sorry if I'm talking over you.
Am I coming through?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you, PK.
Sweet. Sweet. We'll keep
Slick
going, Gabe.
seems to be having a sound delay when somebody new comes on, but
Yeah,
it
typical.
seems to catch up. So
There it is.
we're
There
good.
it is. I hear you. I hear you now. Welcome, buddy. Again, perfect timing. So yes, I've been putting little editorial notes through the symposium here. Socrates' demonic spirit, it does not tell him what he should do. It tells him what he ought not do. And knowing that, we reflect on why Socrates is hesitating to enter into the party. And his hesitation lasts exactly the duration of the eating of the food. And this editorial note is exemplifying his abstinence. He's abstaining. This is the remedial virtue of the 7. And his demonic spirit is known to tell him what to avoid, what to abstain from. So I'm just putting that note here, that Socrates waits till the food is passed around. And it's almost as though you could even take it to the nefarious degree, because I see a great amount of spycraft in Plato's Republic, a great amount of spycraft. And so there's even this implication that there might have been something in the food that he did not want to consume. And he was getting that warning to abstain from the meal. But he can come in and drink all night long. That's no problem. Because the shadow of number 7 is glutton. Okay. Well, if you think so, I will leave him, said Agathon. And then, turning to his servants, he added, let us have supper without waiting for him. Serve up whatever you please, for there is no one to give you orders. Hitherto, I have never left you to yourselves. But on this occasion, imagine that you are our hosts, and that I and the company are your guests. Treat us well, and then we shall commend you. After this supper was served, but still no Socrates, and during the meal Agathon several times expressed a wish to send for him, but Aristodemus objected, and at least when the feast was about half over, for the fit, as usual, was not of long duration, Socrates entered. Agathon, who was reclining alone at the end of the table, begged that he would take the place next to him, that I may touch you, he said, and have the benefit of that wise thought which came into your mind in the portico, and it is now in your possession, for I am certain that you would not have come away until you had found what you sought. How I wish, said Socrates, taking his place as he was desired, that wisdom could be infused by touch out of the fuller into the emptier man, as water runs through wool out of the fuller cup into an emptier one. If that were so, how greatly should I value the privilege of reclining at your side? For you would have filled me full with stream of wisdom, plenteous and fair, whereas my own is of a very mean and questionable sort, no better than a dream. But yours is bright and full of promise, and was manifested forth in all the splendor of youth the day before yesterday, in the presence of more than 30,000 Hellenes. You are mocking, Socrates, said Agathon, and ere long you and I will have to determine who bears off the palm of wisdom. Of this Dionysus shall be the judge, but at present you are better occupied with supper. Socrates took his place on the couch and supped with the rest, and then libations were offered. And after the hymn had been sung to the gods, and there had been and there had been the usual ceremonies, they were about to commence drinking when Pausanias said, "And now, my friends, how can we drink with least injury to ourselves? I can assure you that I feel severely the effects of yesterday's potations and must have time to recover. And I suspect that most of you are in the same predicament, for you were of the party yesterday. Consider then, how can the drinking be made easier?" "I entirely agree," said Aristophanes, "that we should by all means avoid hard drinking, for I was myself one of those who were yesterday drowned in drink. "I think that you are right," said Eryximachus, the son of Achomenus, "but I should still like to hear one other person speak. Is Agathon able to drink hard?" "I am not equal to it," said Agathon. "Then," said Eryximachus, "the weak heads like myself, Aristodemus, Phaedrus, and others who never can drink are fortunate in finding that the stronger ones are not in a drinking mood. I do not include Socrates, who is able either to drink or to abstain, and will not mind whichever we do. Well, as none of the company seems disposed to drink much, I may be forgiven for saying, as a physician, that drinking deep is a bad practice, which I never follow, if I can help, and certainly do not recommend to another, least of all to anyone who still feels the effects of yesterday's carouse. I always do what you advise, and especially what you prescribe as a physician," rejoined Phaedrus, the Myrhinusian. That means that his family is myrrh collectors. They have orchards of myrrh trees. And so his reputation is embedded in the job that his family has given him. Phaedrus, the Myrhinusian, and the rest of the company, if they are wise, will do the same. It was agreed that drinking was not to be the order of the day, but that they were all to drink only so much as they pleased. "Then," said Eryximachus, "as you are all agreed that drinking is to be voluntary, and that there is to be no compulsion, I move in the next place that the flute girl, who has just made her appearance, be told to go away and play to herself, or, if she likes, to the women who are within. Today, let us have conversation instead, and if you will allow me, I will tell you what sort of conversation." This proposal having been accepted, Eryximachus proceeded as follows. "I will begin," he said, "after the manner of Melanape, of Euripides. I will begin, he said, after the manner of Melanippe of Euripides. Not mine, the word, which I am about to speak, but that of Phaedrus. For often he says to me, in an indignant tone, what a strange thing it is, Eryximachus, that whereas other gods have poems and hymns made in their honor, and the great and glorious god Love has no encomiast, encomiast, has no encomiast among all the poets who are so many. There are the worthy sophists too, the excellent Prodicus, for example, who have descanted in prose on the virtues of Heracles and the other heroes. And what is still more extraordinary, I have met with a philosophical work in which the utility of salt has been made the theme of an eloquent discourse, and many other like things have had the like honor bestowed upon them. That's so funny. He's saying that we even have poems about salt, but we don't venerate love in poetry. And only to think that there should have been an eager interest created about them, and yet that to this day no one has ever dared worthy to him love's praises. So entirely has this great deity been neglected. Now, in this, Phaedrus seems to me to be quite right, and therefore I want to offer him a contribution. Also, I think that at the present moment, we who are here assembled cannot do better than honor the god Love. If you agree with me, there will be no lack of conversation, for I mean to propose that each of us in turn, going from left to right, shall make a speech in honor of Love. Let him give us the best which he can, and Phaedrus, because he is sitting first on the left hand, and because he is the father of the thought, shall begin. No one will vote against you, Eryximachus, said Socrates. It's funny how these tiny lines are foreshadowing the larger picture of the entire story, because when Socrates is on trial, nobody votes against their impression of Socrates that was informed by Eryximachus. Is that right? Oh, nope. I'm getting my characters switched. That's Aristophanes. Nobody votes against Aristophanes because later in the story. I'm wrong. How can I oppose your motion, who profess to understanding nothing but matters of love, nor, I presume, will Agathon and Pausanias, and there can be no doubt of Aristophanes, whose whole certain is with Dionysus and Aphrodite. Whose whole concern is with Dionysus and Aphrodite, nor will anyone disagree of those whom I see around me. The proposal, as I am aware, may seem rather hard upon us whose place is last, but we shall be contented if we hear some good speeches first. Let Phaedrus begin the praise of Love, and good luck to him. All the company expressed their assent and desired him to do as Socrates bade him. Aristodemus did not recollect all that was said, nor do I recollect all that he related to me, but I will tell you what I thought most worthy of remembrance, and what the chief speakers said. Editorial note: many people believe that Aristodemus, the person telling the story, a lot of people believe that he actually gave a eulogy, but it was left out because he had a low opinion of his own contribution to the conversation. And that fact is very interesting because it to some degree, it maps out that he did not include his own eulogy, and only those of the chief speakers. Phaedrus began by affirming that Love is a high and mighty god, and wonderful among the gods and men, but especially wonderful in his birth, for he is the eldest of the gods, which is an honor to him. And a proof of his claim to this honor is that of his parents there is no memorial. Neither poet nor prose writer has ever affirmed that he had any. As Hesiod says, first chaos came, and then broad-bosomed earth, the everlasting seat of all that is, and love. In other words, after chaos, the earth and love, these two came into being. Also, Parmenides sings of generation. First in the train of gods, he fashioned love. Footnote, whenever we hear the word train, we should think of the manias. Even like a bridal train, you know, the dress is flowing behind the bride. There's something of a retinue of manias embedded into the word train. And still today with entrainment in our own language. The Acucilius agrees with Hesiod. Thus numerous are the witnesses who acknowledge love to be the eldest of the gods. And not only is he the eldest, he is also the source of the greatest benefit to us. For I know not any greater blessing to a young man who is beginning life than a virtuous lover, or to the lover than a beloved youth. For the principle which ought to be the guide of men who would nobly live, that principle, I say, neither kindred, nor honor, nor wealth, nor any other motive is able to implant so well as love. Of what I am speaking? Of the sense of honor and dishonor, without which neither states nor individuals ever do any good or great work. And I say that a lover who is detected in doing any dishonorable act or submitting through cowardice when any dishonor is done to him by another will be more pained at being detected by his beloved than at being seen by his father or by his companions or by anyone else. The beloved, too, when he is founded in any disgraceful situation, has the same feeling about his lover. And if there were only some way of contriving that a state or an army should be made up of lovers and their loves, they would be the very best governors of their own city, abstaining from all dishonor and emulating one another in honor. And when fighting at each other's side, although a mere handful, they would overcome the world. For what lover would not choose rather to be seen by all mankind than by his beloved, either when abandoning his post or throwing away his arms? We should be ready to die 1,000 deaths rather than endure this. Or who would desert his beloved and fail him in the labor of danger? The veriest coward would become an inspired hero, equal to the bravest at such a time. Love would inspire him. His courage, which, as Homer says, the god breathes into the souls of some heroes, love of his own nature infuses into the lover. Love will make men dare to die for their beloved. Love alone, and women as well as men. Of this, Alcestis, the daughter of Peleus, is a monument to all Hellas, for she is willing to lay down her life on behalf of her husband, when no one else would, although he had a father and a mother, but the tenderness of her love so far exceeded theirs that she made them seem to be strangers in blood to their own son, and in name only related to him. And so noble did this action of hers appear to the gods, as well as to men, that among many who have done virtuously, she is one of the very few of whom, in admiration of her noble action, they have granted the privilege of returning alive to earth. Such exceeding honor is paid by the gods to the devotion and virtue of love. But Orpheus, the son of Oeagrus, the harper, they sent empty away, and presented to him an apparition only of her who he sought. But herself they would not give up, because he showed not spirit. He was only a harp player, and did not dare, like Alcestis, to die for love, but was contriving how he might enter Hades alive. Moreover, they afterwards caused him to suffer death at the hands of women, as the punishment of his cowardice. Very different was the reward of the true love of Achilles towards his lover Patroclus. His lover, and not his love, the notion that Patroclus was beloved one. The notion that Patroclus was the beloved one is a foolish error unto which Aeschylus has fallen, for Achilles was surer the fairer of the two, fairer also than all the other heroes, and, as Homer informs us, he was still beardless and younger far. And greatly as the gods honor the virtue of love, still the return of love on the part of the beloved to the lover is more admired and valued and rewarded by them. For the lover is more divine, because he is inspired by a god. Now Achilles was quite aware, for he had been told by his mother that he might avoid death and return home, and live to a good old age if he abstained from slaying Hector. Nevertheless, he gave his life to revenge his friend, and dared to die, not only in his defense, but after he was dead. Wherefore the gods honored him even above Alcestis, and sent him to the island of the blessed. These are my reasons for affirming that love is the eldest and noblest and mightiest of the gods, and chiefest author and giver of virtue in life, and of happiness after death. And that is the end of Phaedrus, the first speaker's eulogy on love. I'm going to call it there. To be continued until the next flow state.
Very nice. Thank you.
That was great, Gabe. Thank you for that. Really makes you think about how the first god, or the firstborn of the gods, is love, and how that's synonymous. The logos, divine love, divine wisdom, same idea.
Yeah, buddy.
It's the serpent in the garden. It's the savior Eros, that spark that brings death and regeneration. Anybody else want to read for us? I'm really digging this hangout. I see Rachel wiggling fingers.
Rachel's ready. Rachel's ready.
Okay.
Okay. I have a chapter prepared too. So after Rachel.
Sure, we'll get you after that, Z.
Sure. Almost done with this little thing here. Little grains. So I have this book, Answering the Call of the Elementals, Practices for Connecting with Nature Spirits. Haven't read it yet. The chapters look pretty short, so we'll just go for a few minutes. I don't want to take up too much time, and I want to give everyone a chance to read. So, is my mic okay? Just going off of this. Awesome. Okay. So, the introduction, which is short. Even if we're not consciously aware of it, we live in the realm of elemental beings. Everywhere and all the time, They penetrate our souls and slip into our hearts. The whole world around us is ensouled with elemental beings. Elemental beings participate in everything that's happening in nature around us. Our inner world, the world of our thoughts and feelings, is made of elementals, and we constantly produce new ones. In almost all walks of life, we are dealing with elemental beings. The elemental beings are nearer to us than we think. This book is concerned with all the realms of elemental beings I know about. I've tried to be as comprehensible and authentic as possible. A personal rendering seemed most appropriate for this. I did not want to write an abstract book, but rather to invite you to participate in my experience. There is no abstract or general experience of elemental beings. They are only ever specific human beings who connect to specific elemental beings. They carry these elemental beings around with them as part of their constitution. This is why I always describe the specific circumstances, and as precisely as possible, my ways and methods of experiencing our elemental friends. My descriptions are, of course, very limited. I only know a few elementals in a deeper way. That is why, in one of the chapters, I discuss books about elemental beings by people who have written out of direct experience. I owe a lot to those authors who have enhanced my own experience in numerous ways. I've been interested in gaining a direct experience of the spiritual world since I was a young man. I studied a great deal of spiritual literature and took up the anthroposophical? I've not seen that word. Meditative path of schooling formulated by Rudolf Steiner, but made no progress in my ability to perceive elemental beings. I received practical help in developing my faculties in 2003 through a series of workshops on geomancy, a study of the supersensible level of landscapes, gardens, and habitats. Since then, I've been able to regularly connect consciously with elemental beings. Based on my own experience, I believe that a great unearthed treasure of possibilities of perceived elemental beings is hidden in human beings. This was not the case 20 years ago, but our possibilities for conscious perception have advanced since then. Every year, I lead approximately 30 meditation courses, which all include a short introduction to perceiving elemental beings. Every time, I am surprised by how well this works after an appropriate meditative preparation. The participants have pretty evident experiences that mutually reinforce each other. Therefore, I know not just that the elemental beings are much closer to us than we believe, but also have many more possibilities of perceiving them than we think. However, these possibilities can only unfold if developed and if clear practical concepts of elemental beings and clear methods for perception are presented. This is why I began writing Answering the Call of the Elementals. Is the first book in this series. It is a personal introduction to the world of elemental beings with the theme, This is How I Do It. In the second and third books, Collaboration with Elemental Beings, I interviewed more than 30 people who perceive elementals. I spoke with them about how they experience them, what they pay particular attention to, and how they prepare for this interaction, how this ability developed in them, and what special encounters they've had. Each and every one of them has an individual approach, and we can learn a lot from them. With these two books, I want to make this wealth of experience visible and accessible to all with the theme, This is How Others Do It. In the summer of 2007, we drove to a little fishing village called Valin, on the island of Cres in Croatia, for a vacation. I wanted to start writing about elemental beings, but I had hardly got down to what I planned to write before the elemental beings of Cres got involved and a momentum of its own developed. Chapter 1. The Plea. It is an unforgettable morning in the fall of 2004. I'm in Hamburg with Agnes, my beloved partner, in her penthouse apartment doing our morning meditation. I need to mention 2 prior events to make the following comprehensible. First, Agnes and I have been given our first course in anthroposophic meditation at the summer conference in Hibernia, a Waldorf school in the west of Germany, a few months earlier. There was a great deal of interest, it was very uplifting, and we're now considering offering more courses in the future. Second, I met geomancers Wolfgang Schneider and Fritz Bachmann a year ago, in 2003, and these encounters have had many consequences. After learning how geomancers do it, I've finally found a soul path to experience elemental beings that I can walk on my own. I've received several important keys that I had been missing, and now I can sometimes open the door a little and slip into the elemental world with my own consciousness. This morning, Agnes and I have just completed a word meditation, and I'm now trying to stay in pure awareness. This is the state of consciousness before thoughts, feelings, and perceptions occur, a dwelling in a spiritual plane. I'm startled. Something is blowing my way, coming nearer. Before my inner eye, figures form, 4 schematic figures, more than a picture. At the same time, I feel like I'm expanding all over the world, connected to it by love and responsibility. I find myself no longer in Hamburg, but encompassing the whole earth. By this I do not mean the physical earth. I mean the level underlying the earth, the world of the elemental beings. I feel lovingly responsible for each of the elemental beings of this cosmos. These feelings do not come from me, but emanate from these 4 beings and fill me from the inside. As images in my imagination, they appear quite small and imperceptible. In my experience, though, they are big, profoundly big. The 4 figures begin to differentiate, and it becomes clear. One figure feels responsible for the earth beings of our cosmos, another for the water beings, and the third for the fire beings, and the fourth for the air and light beings. Then the figures are again superimposed. I ask, "Who are you?" The answer is there, lightning fast, not as a word, but as a wordless thought. I know this from conversations with spiritual beings. Side note, that is wild when you have that kind of communication. It's like you're trying to explain it with a verb, your mouth, and you're like, that's not how it comes in at all. The answer is there, lightning fast. Let's see here. I try to formulate this wordless thought impulse into words. We are the beings of the nature elements. We encompass and represent them. We come to you with a request. Humanity has forgotten the elemental beings. We live in your subconscious. We are a big part of your lives, but you know nothing about us. This was necessary, but now the time has come for us elemental beings to lead a conscious life together with you again. We bid you use your powers and abilities to open paths to experiencing the elementals. Many other people are also working on this. Everyone in their place. If you take up this task, you will have our empowerment and guidance. The figures disappear again. They surprise me. All the elemental beings I have experienced prior to this have a form appropriate to their realm of responsibility. The water being of a leaf is very small. The fawn of a tree is much bigger. This is different. The kings of the elemental beings, this seems to me to be the appropriate description, appear small in the imagination and do not present themselves like kings. I only find this out through our conversation. Their physical characteristics do not seem important. Apparently, these elemental kings blow formlessly through the elemental world and only take on a form when necessary in order to be more easily perceived. During the preparatory phase of a greater undertaking, I am in the habit of paying attention to whether the endeavor is supported by the spiritual world. In hindsight, the endeavors that had the backing of the spiritual world were effective and full of impact, even though the success I experienced in the beginning did not always manifest. If there was no clear support, then the going was often rough. I keep focusing on the mood. My employer is the spiritual world, and this employer gives me missions and sends me into earthly work environments as a temporary worker. Through this, I have learned that very high beings like to come into contact with us. The spiritual world is different from the earthly one in this regard. The head of a big company does not have time to speak to every employee. On the other hand, high angelic beings, highly developed deceased human beings, or the Christ being can contact many individuals simultaneously. Their awareness spreads out like a fountain on all sides. There are no limits to their capacity. Therefore, you can always address the highest beings on the highest levels and count on their help without having a bad conscience about taking up their time. So I'm not really surprised that these kings of the elementals have now contacted me, but I am still moved and inspired. It is time. In this moment, I decide. It is all perfectly clear in an instant. I will do their bidding. As a first step, I will focus on teaching the meditation courses, and the following steps will develop from there. Meditation is the foundation for perceiving elemental beings, for perceiving anything spiritual. Only when meditation becomes as normal in our society as eating and drinking can collaborating consciously with the elementals become an everyday affair. In the courses, I can practice perceiving elemental beings with the participants and gather many of my own experiences. Agnes is on board. Meditation is her thing. She's been meditating since she was a young woman. Our different abilities and motivations complement each other well, and so we begin organizing our courses. In Chapter 2, Vacation in Vallon. It is nearly 3 years after my encounter with the elementals, and the meditation courses are running surprisingly well, almost every weekend. Agnes and I are teaching in Germany and Switzerland, and many participants have found a path for their own meditation practice. By now, I have met many more elemental beings and learned much about them and their world. In addition, I have encountered several people who have their own conscious connection to the elementals, and through them I have been able to enhance and refine my own perceptual paths. I have not had any further clear contact with the elemental kings. Occasionally I have thought briefly about them, but have not really sought to contact them as I don't have a real question for them. I'm working on fulfilling my promise, discovering one thing after another, and the time is taken up with doing this. In the autumn of 2006, I give a lecture about elemental beings in the Forum 3 Cultural Center in Stuttgart, where I met Anacalypsis, who helps authors find publishing houses. She asks me if I would like to write a book about this subject. Since this idea is already on my radar, we soon come to an agreement, but I never find time to write. Always on the go, already involved with writing a book on the transformation of the earth, moving, kids, referendum in Hamburg, programming a database, I simply find no peace of mind for the book about elemental beings. We are now packing the car, bags, tents, air mattresses, books, a camping gas stove. The summer vacation has begun. My sons, Lucas, 14 in a week, and Conrad, just 13, Agnes and I are on our way to Vallon on the Croatian island of Kres, in the Mediterranean Sea. We have already been there twice. Vallon is a little fishing village. The campground is free of cars and directly on the sea, a manageable world in which much is possible for children and its dream, for grown-ups as well. Powerful nature, little tourism, and friends from previous vacations will surely be there again. During this vacation, I want to write every day besides enjoying the sea. I'm looking forward to it. The book has the provisional title, How to Perceive Elemental Beings. We drive from South Germany over the mountains to Innsbruck, up the Brenner, and then left onto the country roads through the Dolomites. While driving the winding roads, my thoughts wander to the elemental beings and their condition, and I notice that it is not good. Feelings of worry fill my heart. What does this mean? I look inward and notice that the elemental kings are approaching, still a little distant, but clearly in my experience. Feelings are emanating from them. I have to brake, down to 48 kilometers an hour, a tight 180-degree turn, and this is really not the moment. I cannot concentrate. I am in the middle of driving. We have to postpone this until a better time. Something else is sounding in my soul. This contact feels like a problem, a crisis, a rescue from a threat, complete engagement required. All sorts of things for which I am not at all prepared. I'm on vacation. Finally, 3 weeks without outer responsibilities and appointments. I want to loosen, not weigh down my soul. But I do not think this out loud, as if I could hide it from the elemental kings. They have already disappeared again. It is a very short impression. It is drowned out by other experiences, and I soon forget it. The journey continues, the expressway down to the Mediterranean, Trieste, Slovakia and Croatian border, currency exchange, Rijeka, getting gas, ice cream, finally Brestova and the ferry station. In front of us lie the sparse mountains of Kres, above the sea in the setting sun. There, where you can no longer see anything, is where Valen should be. Like I said, these chapters are short, so just maybe a few, maybe 5-10 more minutes. That's all right with you guys? Chapter 3, The Light Fairy. First day in Valen, the tents are up. I found a nice spot on a terrace in the woods with lots of shade. I can put up a rain and sunshade. And this is very important. The kids have put up their tent a bit farther down. The sun is shining. The sea is warm. Let's go swimming, first of all. One can see the port from the beach on the left and a few houses in the village. The cliffs begin on the other side of the beach. I know them well. How often have I looked at these cliffs? When I looked in this direction as we departed last year, my eyes became a bit teary. I thought it was because of Valen, the experiences and the end of the vacation, but now I think it was because of these cliffs. Not because of the cliffs themselves, of course, but because of my feelings about them. An emotional connection to stones, plants, and water is always a connection to the elemental beings in them. What is happening in these cliffs on an elemental level? I swim closer to them. As expected, I experience many earth elementals, smaller and bigger gnomes. In front of one pointy cliff, there's a very warm, attractive, homey mood. It takes up the space of approximately 4 square meters. The more I concentrate on it, the stronger the feeling becomes. What is it? Probably an elemental being. To better grasp it, I go through my repertoire of experiences. There is a resonance in my heart chakra, and it has the feeling of an air being. But not a normal air being, no. It's more like a light fairy. Air and light fairies are closely connected and traditionally put into the same category. Light fairy means that she lives in the light and is responsible for the light in the landscape. In fairy tales, the light beings are called fairies, so I call this beautiful being a light fairy. She feels lovely, attractive, and radiant. That is on the feeling level. Which form do I experience? It is not a fixed form, but like a cloud radiating out on all sides. Radiance is the essential attribute. Through this slow, always more exact perceiving and describing, my experience becomes clearer and more differentiated. If I did not proceed in this way, step by step, I would only experience that there is something here, and it would stay diffuse. Concepts are like flashlights. Through them I can see better and in more differentiated ways, but they're also the source of error. Concepts have to be supported by perceptions. When you begin speculating and stop perceiving, then you can fall into error. The perception is always true. Only the interpretation of the perception can be wrong if you apply the wrong concepts. I say goodbye to the light fairy and swim on. The next day I visit her again. I quickly come into this familiar sensation. She shines strongly into my heart, almost too strongly. It is almost a pressure. What's going on here? In holding this question, I experience that the fairy wants to come into my aura. She presses into my left side. She wants to make a home there. This already began last year. The threads were spun then. This is why I was so touched on departing last year. I have experienced on occasion that elemental beings jump into my aura and come along. Mostly it's only for a few days, then the paths separate again. In a few cases, elemental beings have taken up their permanent residence in my aura and become a steady part of my personality. If I have understood correctly, the fairy wants to take up a permanent residence. I ask myself if I want to grant her request. The light fairy has made a good impression. I do not have a light fairy in my aura yet, at least I do not know of one. Probably some smaller light beings are active in my aura, but I'm not clear about this. I only get a fraction of the real elemental world in my conscious experience, while most of the rest of it goes by me. Through having conscious contact with the light fairy, I could learn a lot from her in the long run. So far, the air and light fairies of nature have been strangers to me. I only ever experience their presence before the communication falters, and I do not come into an inner experience and conversation. With the help of the light fairy, I could perhaps get a better connection with and understanding of all air and light fairies. She would thus be a good complement to the other members of my personal elemental being team. The beings that are always around me have special characteristics and capabilities, but I do not want to impose any kind of force on her from my end. The light fairy can try it out and leave any time she wants, so I give in to her wishes. I observe how I now have the same sensation above my left shoulder as I have close to the top of the cliff. The light fairy is active in both places. Since she really appears to want to stay permanently, I look for an appropriate name in order to talk to her. I ask, "What is your name?" Something is formed, but I cannot grasp it properly. When I repeat the question, there is no reaction. I decide to call her Lara. This was the decision it was going in when I couldn't grasp it. This was the direction it was going in when I couldn't grasp it. In the next few weeks, I can experience her repeatedly. She is there, but I rarely come into further conversation with her. It's like a silent getting used to one another. I still need to better understand how she senses, and vice versa, so that we can come into further communication. And that'll probably be the last one, because the next one's much longer, with some experiences. It goes into more detail on types.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fun book.
I have an episode coming up.
Excited to see where it goes.
The next InnerVerse is going to be about, it's already recorded, but it's about like the contact experience. And, you know, I wonder how much of the creepy so-called alien experiences people have are this elemental concept, but just sort of imposing itself as a reflection of maybe their own tendencies towards self-violation, you know, something like that.
Yeah, I've had a few experiences with some elementals a little more recently, and not all of them are kind. That needs to be made clear, but it's very much like how he's describing. You know, if they've been around long enough, they will influence your personality. They will influence you, and that makes sense because we live in a material world where, you know, we might look at a man-made thing, but not realize that they're still present in it. You know, we're still interacting with them, even if they take a different form. And in one of the books I have by Susan Raven, you know, she talks about how a lot of times the elementals that are disgruntled have been put into a form that they don't necessarily agree with. You know, it's like different types of art. You know, maybe there's a form that you're like, wow, this is so beautiful, and it grips you and you feel into it. Because the elementals are on board with it. They're like, yeah, we're about this beauty. We love this. And then you look at other types of art and you feel repulsed and it's awful. Like how the brutalism college is going up. And you're like, this is terrible. And they agree. They're like, I don't want to be formed like this. This is not harmonious. This is not how we work well together, even. So it would be easy then, I would think, to come into contact with some of those. And if you're very sensitive and susceptible, they might hang out, and then you'd both feel disgruntled for forever about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's my buddy Ryder Lee, you know his channel, Raised by Giants. He's done a deep dive that I thought was very impressive on UFO cults and getting into the stuff, because a lot of it is rooted. Meaning there's also going to be a lot of egregores out there because of how the lore builds on itself outside of the zeitgeist. And the hypnotic regression people are all operating under pretenses because their thing is hypnotic regression for aliens. And then somebody who doesn't know whether it is or not goes to them, gets it confirmed with bias from the hypnotic regressor. And then this becomes part of official UFO psychic phenomenon research.
Mm-hmm.
And they completely overlook the process that got there. They just trusted the science, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So,
So many people forget that the word alien, what it really means. Now there's an image in your head of what an alien is, but
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear that right? Like at the beginning of what you read, it was something like the elements aren't beings like in and of themselves, but like are through you, like they can be perceived that way through you. I thought that was really interesting, that distinction that you made.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the things that we see is like how he's describing. If you say gnome, everybody has some pointy hat, and they think that's a gnome, but that's just an image that may have been used as an interface, a relatable interface, and it's not really their full form. It's not what they really truly are.
Well, I believe the gnome cap, some of you guys I think know about this stuff, is what, the Phrygian cap. It's based on the Phrygian cap.
Right.
And this is like, what, Santa Claus and several freaking things. It's a wizard's cap, basically, right? Like, this is what some kinds of wizards look like. We expect this with Gandalf as well. So it doesn't matter what kind of wizard, right? It's a dark sorcerer or a light sorcerer could have that kind of a cap. It's about the entire package that's coming with the person. Personification of the mythos was only done as a teaching mechanism for the point that the quality of the gods and the spirits and the primordial forces are qualities that are within us as well, right? A person who goes into a one modality mindset ceases to be in the agency of their avatar, which is a reflection of the gods, or the gods are actually more a reflection of it, in a sense, right? There's this interplay. But you go into, if we're talking Norse, it's like the Jotun, right? It's like, if I'm just angry all the time, like, yeah, Thor is known to have his wrath, and Odin his wrath, like, and all these different wrath from these different gods that have martial value and stuff in their personifications. But if that's my one modality, I'm just angry all the time, now I'm a spirit of anger, right? I'm not a god. I might be a very powerful spirit of anger, but I do no good. I have no agency. I'm a slave to my urge to be angry, right? This is like a Jotun possession, right? You've got an evil spirit in you, a wight, right? The magic of the Nothes rune is used to dispel these kinds of forces when they've taken over. That anger can easily be an egregore because of your personal spites and how you've turned something that you hate or are angry at into a projected thought form in front of you that is antagonizing you all day. We see this archetype all the time in every film.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a fun story to share. On the word alien, it has recently come onto my radar that the Greeks were named the Hellenes, in a very lovely poetic context. The Hellenes, their language was action oriented. That's something we're drumming on now. That the Greeks, we call them Greeks, but the Hellenes were action based in their language. And I'm just going to say that and leave it for future weaves. But my daughter has been instilled with a story that is her inheritance from her blood. And that is a story that I've given to her about an experience that I had witnessing her mother and her grandfather exchanging an unspoken love that I did my best to convey to my daughter the moment of this unspoken action. And it was when I was walking with her mother and her grandfather, essentially my father-in-law and her mother. We were walking through the garden, and her mother saw a thistle flower in the garden and very proudly announced that the thistle flower is the national flower of Scotland. And her mother did not see her father's reaction. I was blessed to see her father glow and just beam with a pride that was so pronounced. There were no words. And I was humbled by the radiance of a father beaming pride onto his daughter for knowing their national inheritance. And it was just amazing to see him nod and smile in approval. And her mother didn't even see the nod or the smile, but I did. And it impacted me in a just such a beautiful way to see a father beaming with so much pride that it just could not be spoken of. But of course, I'm a blabbermouth, so I'm going to talk about it for hours. This 1 minute of exchange. So I've instilled that story into my daughter with a lot of emotion, and so her soil is ripe for receptivity when she's walking along and she sees thistle flowers for the rest of her life. That moment of the story that I've conveyed to my daughter has set her up for the elementals to come through in a very particular context. And so, yeah, all of those unspoken energies, I think, make the soil just ready for receptivity and to meet the energies when they come to meet her on her path. Yeah, so I thought I would share that her elementals, I can already predict what flower they'll be favoring in her path.
That's really beautiful.
Gonna hit us with some Manly Palmer Hall, Zerlath?
Yeah. I was about to ask if you wanted that now with that pause that we just had. The chapters on this are pretty short, so if you want me to do more of a longer read, I can read more than one chapter. Because this
We'll
is
see how it goes. We'll do one.
I have something too that's not too long either. So
let's do a chapter
short
and
and
then
short.
and we'll get PKs and then we'll see where we're at.
All right.
Change the
So
banner.
I picked specifically, not from the beginning, but I picked chapter 19, which is towards the end, but I thought it was the most interesting because it's a prophetic dream. The chapter's called The Prophetic Dream of General Mclellan. So, got a battle general having a vision, right? This is very Odinic territory in my book. In a dark hour of military apprehension, the general of the Union forces was visited by a vision in a dream. A voice spoke, and a map came alive with troop movements as the enemy forces moved into the very positions he had intended to occupy. The voice told him that he had been betrayed. He raised his eyes and looked into the face of George Washington. When Mclellan awoke, his map was covered with marks and signs and figures indicating the strategy that prevented the capture of the nation's capital. Also included in the dream was the warning of the father of our country, that he would wage still another struggle for existence ere another century shall have gone by against the oppressors of the whole earth. The vision of Constantine changed the course of the Roman Empire. The visions of Joan of Arc preserved France in an hour of darkest need, and the vision that came to General Mclellan was a powerful force in preserving the union of the American people. The story of General McClellan's dream, preserved in the general's own words, seems to have appeared in print for the first time in the Portland, Maine Evening Courier of March 8, 1862. Had the story not been true, it is almost certain that McClellan himself would have made some statement of disapproval or demanded a retraction. General McClellan's career as a soldier was not exceptionally brilliant. He was a good organizer, but made many enemies because of certain fixations of temperament. But there can be no question of his sincerity and his dedication to the cause of the Union. In the interests of brevity, here we will give a digest of parts of the story of the dream with the general's own words preserved in the more significant passages. At 2 o'clock of the third night after General McClellan's arrival at Washington, D.C., to take command of the United States Army, he was working over his maps and studying the reports of scouts. A feeling of intense weariness came over him, and leaning his forehead on his folded arm, he fell asleep at his table. He had not been sleeping more than 10 minutes when it seemed that the locked door of his room was suddenly thrown open, and someone strode up to him and in a voice terrible with power spoke. "General McClellan, do you sleep at your post? Rouse you, or ere it be prevented, the foe will be in Washington." The general then describes in some detail his strange feelings. At the moment, he seemed to be suspended in the center of infinite space, and the voice came from a hollow distance all about him. He started up, but whether he was really awake, he was never able to decide. The table covered with maps was still before him, but the furniture, the walls of the room, and other familiar objects were no longer visible. Instead, he was gazing upon a living map, including the entire area of the country from the Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean. McClellan tried to see the features of the being that stood with him, but could discern nothing but a vapor having the general outline of a man. As he looked upon the great map, McClellan was amazed to see the movements of the various troops and regiments and a complete pattern of the enemy's lines and distribution of forces. The general was immediately infused with a great elation, for he felt that the movements on this extraordinary map would enable him to bring the war to a speedy and victorious termination. Then his elation changed to great apprehension. He saw the enemy forces moving to certain points, which he himself had intended to occupy within the next few days. He quietly realized that in some way his plans were known to the enemy. Then again, the voice spoke. "General McClellan, you have been betrayed, and had God not willed otherwise, ere the sun of tomorrow had set the Confederate flag, would have waved above the Capitol and your own grave. But note what you see, your time is short." His pencil, moving with the speed of thought, Mclellan transferred the true position from the living map to the paper map on his desk. When this had been done, Mclellan became aware that the figure standing near him had increased in light and glory until it shone like the noonday sun. As he raised his eyes, he looked into the face of George Washington. Oops. The first president, with sublime and gentle dignity, looked upon the bewildered officer and spoke as follows. General McClellan, while yet in the flesh, I beheld the birth of the American Republic. It was indeed a hard and bloody one, but God's blessing was upon the nation, and therefore, through this, her first great struggle for existence. He sustained her, and with his mighty hand brought her out triumphantly. A century has not passed since then, and yet the child republic has taken her position of peer with nations whose pages of history extend for ages into the past. She has since those dark days, by the favor of God, greatly prospered. History extend for ages. Oh, I'm sorry. I read the line twice. greatly prospered, and now, by very reason of this prosperity, has she been brought to her second great struggle? This is by far the most perilous ordeal she has to endure, passing as she is from childhood to opening maturity. She's called on to accomplish that vast result, self-conquest, to learn that important lessons, self-control, self-rule, that in the future will place her in the van of power and civilization. But her mission will not then be fixed, for ere another century shall have gone by, the oppressors of the whole earth, hating and envying her exaltation, shall join themselves together and raise up their hands against her. But if she still be found worthy of her high calling, they shall surely be discomfited, and then will be ended her third and last great struggle for existence. Thenceforth shall the republic go on, increasing in power and goodness, until her border shall end only in the remotest corners of the earth, and the whole earth shall, beneath her shadowing wing, become a universal republic. Let her, in her prosperity, however, remember the Lord her God. Her trust be always in him, and she shall never be confounded. As the spirit visitor ceased speaking, he raised his hand over McClellan's head in blessing, and the next instant a petal of thunder rumbled through space. McClellan woke with a start. He was again in his room with his maps spread out on the table before him. But there was one difference. The maps were covered with marks, signs, and figures which he had inscribed there during the vision. McClellan walked about the room to convince himself that he was really awake. He then returned and looked at the maps. The markings were still there. Convinced now that the experience was heaven sent, McClellan had his horse saddled and rode from camp to camp, making the necessary changes in his strategy to meet the enemy's planned offensive. His moves were successful, and he prevented the capture of the city of Washington. At the time, the Confederate army was so close that Abraham Lincoln, sitting in his study at the White House, could hear the rumble of the Confederate artillery. General McClellan concludes his account of the strange vision that saved the Union with these words: "Our beloved, glorious Washington shall again rest quietly, sweetly in his tomb, until perhaps the end of the prophetic century approaches, that is, to bring the Republic to a third and final struggle, when he may once more, laying aside the crements of Mount Vernon, became a messenger." Sorry, I scrolled down to re-steady the thing and I lost my place. Sleeping once more, 10 minutes. No, beforehand is folded far. What? Question of his sincerity. Why am I crazy? The clown tried to see the features that stood before him. Victorious tournament. I'm sorry, this thing skipped the whole page. I don't know how that happened. Sucker of peace. Ugh. Okay. century, the powers of the earth. The future is too vast. Comprehend. Okay. I'm just going to go right here. General Mclellan concludes his account of the strange vision that saved the Union with these words. Okay, hold on. I can definitely go up a little bit further. Okay. But her mission will not then be finished for ere another century. Okay, I read that. All right, I'm back. As the spirit visitor ceased speaking, he raised his hand over Mclellan, blessed him. Okay, Mclellan walked about the room to convince himself. Okay, his moves were successful, and he prevented the capture of the city of Washington. At that time, the Confederate Army was so close that Abraham Lincoln, sitting in his study at the White House, could hear the rumble of the Confederate artillery. General Mclellan concludes his account of the strange vision that saved the Union with these words. Our beloved, glorious Washington shall again rest quietly, sweetly in his tomb, until perhaps the end of the prophetic century approaches. That is, to bring the Republic to a third and final struggle, when he may once more, laying aside the credence of Mount Vernon, became a messenger of succor and peace from the great ruler who has all the nations of the earth in his keeping. But the future is too vast for our comprehension. We are the children of the present, when peace shall again have folded her bright wings and settled upon our land, the strange unearthly map marked while the spirit eyes of Washington look down, shall be preserved among the American archives as a precious reminder to the American nation of what in their second great struggle for existence they owe to God and the glorified spirit of Washington. Verily, the works of God are above the understanding of man. It is not difficult to understand how a man who has been granted so strange an experience should come to realize that a secret destiny is overshadowing the country for which he fought. The prophetic import contained in the vision is now apparent, and as the entire account was published in 1862, there can be no doubt that we are in the presence of a genuine example of foreknowledge. It is now 80 years since Washington appeared to General Mclellan, and within the century, the powers of the earth have risen to destroy the concept of world democracy. America is in the vanguard of the democratic nations, seeking to preserve its heritage from the encroachments of totalitarian powers. Already it is obvious that in the post-war period of Reconstruction, America must become a leader of nations. In the establishment of commonwealth of peoples, the purpose for which we are created is revealing itself through the long process of time, and that purpose is indeed our most sacred heritage. It is written in the old books that when the brothers of the quest desire to bring about changes in the mortal state, they send messengers and strangers dreams and mystics visions and accomplish their purpose by revealing their will to the leaders of nations in sundry and curious ways. Whether we wish to believe that the spirits of the dead return to guide the living, or whether we choose to accept that man possesses faculties and powers which under great stress may bring his consciousness a little nearer to universal truth, one thing is certain. Oh, sorry, 1 second. I had the page skip on me again, but I think I got it under control. One thing is, okay, certain. Men unaccustomed to the spiritual ways of life have received visions and have heard voices, and by obeying these mysterious powers, they've contributed to the progress and security of their fellow man. So that's chapter 19, Mclellan's Dream.
Thank you.
How was my George Washington voice?
It's good. You got into it.
Good.
Commanding.
I needed the impact.
Most commanding. So Washington had a name amongst the Native Americans that sounds just like Washington. I have it written down right here. The burner of towns. and he inherited from his father. His father also was known as the burner of the cities. Here it is. Hold on. Town taker is another translation. The town taker. And so there's actually three nicknames that they would call him. Cantocarius, Hanodagoniers, Hanodagoniers, and Hanadagaeos. Hanadagaeos. All are different tribes, names for the takers of towns that he inherited from his father, allegedly.
It's a great reputation, isn't it? I mean, that's sarcastically. I think that's terrible. Someone thinks it's epic.
Hey, Rachel, is your mic low? It sounds low to me. I have to turn you up.
It's all good. There's not going to be a perfect audio balance with this many people.
Just making sure. Didn't want anybody.
I don't have the best mic set up currently, so if you're hearing it odd, then sorry about that.
All right.
You got PK.
Yeah, so I am going to read from this book by Peter Kingsley called Catafalque. And so that's a French word, interesting word. Had to look up what it is, but basically, for those curious, it's a basically like a raised scaffolding that then they put a casket on. It says it's a raised box or similar platform, often movable, that is used to support the casket, coffin, or body of a dead person. So interesting title to it. What it's kind of about, because I'm gonna like skip to a section. And so just let me give you a little bit of background. It's like very it's about Jung and kind of his views on stuff, but then it also goes into kind of larger topics, but like just keeps referring back to Jung. So it's kind of like a very like positive Jung book, I feel like. And it's a good book. It's got lots of good references and stuff. But what I wanted to go with is, Gabe, you were talking about earlier how words change their meaning, and you also had a term for it that I never heard before. What was that term?
Hypochorism. It might be, actually, I think it's hyper. I think we said hyperchorism.
But so why that just jumped out at me is because I was planning on reading this, and it kind of goes into that. So let me start. And so, all right. And what I'll do too is probably read a couple snippets from footnotes that it has here. So, all right. So this is talking about our relation to the sacred, and then also how it's morphed, and then talks about some words, one such as therapy, that I find very interesting. All right. So here we go. Even his insistence that far from wanting to put a stop to people's suffering, his wish was to help them suffer consciously. And they're referring to Jung. There's almost nobody, though, who cares to note the links Jung himself felt pulled to go to, that he could suffer consciously for the sake of the sacred. Quote, because I wanted God to be alive and free from suffering, and free from the suffering man has put on him by loving his own reason more than God's secret intentions. Close quote. Of course, he hardly expected anyone to take this kind of talk seriously, which to a certain extent explains why he qualified it straight away as just the words of a mystical fool. And this goes to a footnote that I'm going to read parts of. So, footnote: Jung was quite open in stating his work was never intended to help people escape their suffering, but was meant to give them the strength they needed to suffer consciously. Only in private, though, did he indicate just how far he took the practice of conscious suffering, especially in the letter he wrote to some guy, G. Adler. Quote, I consciously and intentionally made my life miserable because I wanted God to be alive and free from the suffering of man. Free from suffering man has put on him by loving his own reason more than God's secret intentions. Try to apply seriously what I've told you, not that you might escape suffering. No, nobody can escape it, but that you might avoid the worst, blind suffering. Close quote. All right. End footnote. What makes things so intensely troubling is that the selfishness and unconsciousness, or is it sub, in question, the vanity of all, the reasonableness Jung is referring to, are never only haunting the most likely places, the obvious places, or the predictable ones. That would be far too straightforward and easy. They are everywhere, but above all, where you would least expect, in the brightest philosophical ideas and noblest spiritual thoughts. They tend to gather and flock around accepted concepts, which sound so innocent and self-evident, so plausible and sensible, nobody thinks to question them. They attach themselves to the unshakable conventions about ourselves that we picked up as children and keenly hold on to, the firmest of beliefs about our future, past, and present. And this applies, all right, here's where it gets kind of good. And this applies to also our concepts of healing. In fact, it applies to even the most basic language we use for healing, like the simple, familiar word therapy. Nowadays, just the mention of therapy is enough to conjure up ideas of psychotherapy, physiotherapy, all different ways I can be helped to get better, right? We think of therapy like, getting my knee fixed up, or sitting in a chair in a psychologist or office. But this is not how things used to be. So originally, therapeia in ancient Greek meant caring. And when you go back as far as you can, you come to one very specific and constant expression. Therapeia theon meant attending to the divine, caring for the gods and serving them, doing what humans ought to do to make sure the gods are all right. And we got another footnote here. I'm going to read part of it. So it just references on this like fundamental idea, and it gives references to like see Hesiod's Theogony and Workadays, see Homer, and gives a bunch of references. But then down here it goes, therapia and cognates were also used to describe the process of tending to the sick or wounded. And this was the sense that helped Plato to shape our exclusive modern preoccupation with providing therapia for body and soul. It should also perhaps be added that James Hillman's favorite etymologizing of the word therapia, quote, the chair of the therapist is indeed a mighty throne, end quote. Complete self-serving fantasy. All right. End of footnote. And let me pick up here. So before I continue, I like Gabe have a very love-hate relationship with Plato. And you know, some of his stuff is good, but then others is like, ooh, I see how people take that, you know. So very love-hate relationship. I don't discourage anyone from reading Plato by all means, but think for yourself. We'll just put it that way. All right. So then something quite interesting happens. There's a particular place where Plato focuses his thoughts on therapia theon, caring for the gods, and he basically argues this quote: "Care for the gods? Why on earth would humans want to care for the gods when the gods are so much better and greater and than us? There's absolutely nothing that they could need. It might be nice for people if they really want to make a gesture by, you know, paying the gods a bit of attention. But to feel one is doing something useful, that wouldn't just be pretty stupid. It would be utterly ridiculous." And then there's a footnote here. And what this kind of sums up here is Socrates doing Socrates things in Plato's Euthyphro, where basically Socrates goes like, you know, and so isn't only those who, if you want to care for a horse, then isn't the best person to do that a horseman or like a horse carer person? It's like, well, yeah. And so it gets, you know, agrees to a bunch of stuff, and then basically, you know, Socrates spins it as in like, aren't the gods greater than us? Well, yeah, certainly. So is there anything you could do to like make to better the gods? And it's like, well, no, because they're like already better than us. And so it gets to this idea, Socrates spins it, that we as little humans, you know, what could the gods need from us? All right. So, and that specifically, if anyone wants to look it up, is in Euthyphro 12e to 15c. And then comes Aristotle. And Aristotle and later thinkers managed to convince themselves that if anyone is capable of offering real therapy to the gods, it can only be done by becoming the purest of rationalists. And then it goes on to say, this is nothing but a mockery of Socrates' sacred service to the god Apollo, which is in Plato's Apology 23b and on, which had led him to heal people of their illusions by destroying all their proud concepts instead of helping to build them up. And then it talks about, you know, this duality of Apollo as a healer and a destroyer. But it's a shining example of how easily perceived realities can become distorted and even inverted within a space of just a single generation or two. And footnote, and I don't have that much longer, so let's go back to it. There's no need to say too much about the enlightened rationality here, which from any reasonable perspective all sounds exactly the way it should. And so far, we've only come as far as Plato. His greatest disciple, Aristotle, is still waiting at the next turn in the road. This is the way it works, though. One more milestone in the human's mind adventure of submitting everything to the criteria of its own reasoning. Just another pace of separating people from this, or another piece from separating people from the sacred. As I mentioned earlier, words matter. In spite of all the ready justifications and superficial rationalizations, they have a significance and importance far beyond what our reasonable minds want to tell us. Always there are the consequences. Once something like these thoughts of Plato, however, original or unoriginal, has been put into words, there is no going back. And from a deeper perspective, nothing could be more disastrous, because his argument is just another nail in the coffin of our relation to the sacred. And then goes on to say, is one more step in articulating the unconscious attitude that says, let's make sure the divine takes good care of us. But as for finding out what in reality the divine might possibly need, let it look after itself. So this whole idea of, like, people praying now, and I'm not saying, like, obviously, I didn't write this. So it goes kind of without saying, is like, I don't necessarily agree with all of this or whatever, but it's interesting that it raises thoughts. It raises thoughts of, like, just thinking of Christianity and whatever. You always, like, pray to God and Jesus or whatever as to what, they can do for you, right? And it's never this kind of, like, reciprocal relationship. It seems very one way. And it goes with the rationalization that we little humans are so much less than the divine, that, what could they possibly, need from little old me? All right. So back to the book. From here onwards, one can sit back and watch the idea of looking after of how the idea of looking after the gods starts, almost as if by magic vanishing from the Western world. It gets pushed more and more to the fringes of ancient culture until even the notion of actually caring for the gods, doing the therapia, ends up being dismissed as something altogether alien and foreign, superstitious, and barbaric. And yeah, it just quotes a text. And those consequences extend far beyond Greece or Rome. For thousands of years, Christians flocked to church, not only to look after God, only to check that God is looking after them. So kind of what I just said. Christians flock to church not to look after God, but only to check that God is looking after them. The real motive is hardly to take care of Christ, but to go on making quite sure every week he is still alive enough, suffering enough for our sins, to keep on attending to us in our absent mindedness and self-absorption. I guess I'm going to stop there, because it kind of just gets wordy and kind of repetitive of repeating the same idea, but you guys get the idea. One other thing that is super short that I could read is the kind of etymology. It has to do with theurgy and the word meditation. How do you guys feel about that, or any comments on what I just read? Yeah.
I'm bubbling over. I'll let other people go first, though.
I do, right? Because I have my heathen relationships with my gods. I have my former relationship under the way that Catholicism and different kinds of Protestantism, have their relationship with God, and takes you a while to kind of get used to what you're refitting yourself to, because a lot of people that go into the old gods are going into it half baked with their pseudo understanding of how you have a relationship with Jesus and Jehovah and things like this, right? And there's a symbiotic relationship between us and the gods. This is why I made the points that I made before about, like, the crossover from being in your avatar with your agency, right? It's just like, the world is changed by men who have made various kinds of rituals, right? It's hard to describe, but it's a missing thing that, like, the affairs of this world is something that the gods actually need us to work with because of the free will bit, right? And that free will bit is there because mankind's separation from the gods in that relationship is also part of the gods releasing control. And then we're supposed to remember the very divine laws that come from the creator above the gods. And so once you realize there is still the one above all, if you will, the higher force, that's when you start having a clear relationship with things. It's just like, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu are all emanations of the Brahman. The Brahman and Brahma are not the same thing. And, the Brahman is basically how the Hindus express this concept of the creator, the higher force. And you see the Brahman has very specific roles in the wholeness of the continuity of all that is. Where Brahma and the other three are deeply involved in the drama, right? And they're deeply involved in the drama because they have that personified relationship to it, right? So it's about knowing when you're taking yourself out of the personified relationship, because we're not supposed to treat them the way we treat our slave master, right? I had a dream where, Anubis came to me, which is why I've always been working with Anubis for the last couple of years and have him on my altar. Another art project I have to finish. My instinct when I saw Anubis in my semi-flow state of the dream was to take one step back and just bow my head a little bit like this. And then Anubis sicked his dog on me and I woke up, right? It was just like, and then I talked to
cool, though.
It's like, yeah, it's because you didn't treat him like your brother. This is like, Anubis is a super fucking benevolent deity, right? And there was like nothing to worry about, and you kind of shot yourself down a little bit, and he taught you a lesson for that. That's what some wise people told me when I needed a dream interpretation, right? So
thanks for that.
That's what we're doing. We're working together for the good of this world in something that is greater than these pantheon of gods that are part of our regular practice.
Nice.
It's a cool passage there, PK. Makes me think of a lot of stuff I've brought up on Vibrance in the past around the therapeutes. So I pulled up a few quotes. The therapeutes were also the Essenes. It's actually like a whole list of sects that are essentially the same thing: Gymnosophists, Chalcidians, Dionysians, Eleusinians, Pythagoreans, Chaldeans, eclectics, ecclesiastics, ascetics, all kinds of things related to this idea of being either called out or like chosen. And the word therapeut also referring to their sort of miraculous gift of healing. And you're saying there's sort of like in this passage, you're talking about how the idea almost pertains to, I want to say commanding God, but kind of commanding God. They called it leucomancy or white magic, where prayers or fasting or baptisms, sacraments and stuff were believed to have the same power over good demons, and even God himself, as the black magic had over evil demons and their supreme head, the devil. So it kind of just, as circles around to this thing I like to talk about a lot philosophically, how our relationship to archetypes is a conversation, not like an inner influence, but it's a two-way street that whenever we symbolically interact with archetypes or set intentions with archetypal patterns that we impose upon in a structure, like a ceremony or something, that we're commanding is the wrong word, but we're sort of we're setting our preference for how we want that archetype to show up. I think that's what a lot of magic is about.
Steering
That's
might be better.
Steering.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot about like what we were talking about with the elementals when he talks about getting in your head too much and with the experience. So if we archetypalize these gods too much, then we're ruining our experience with what I view not just as some like divine being, but it's more, to me, they're more like divine ancestors who are on a level of consciousness that, you know, through the ages we might still have remnants of, but, you know, like I'm nowhere near, you know, Brit. I don't have her strength, I don't have her abilities, I don't have her gnosis and healing, but she would be an ancient ancestor to me. So when we talk about like working with them, that's the thing, PK, I liked your reading because it brought up something that's actually still happening today, where people will look at these ancient deities and relegate them to archetypes and relegate them to something that's past and irrelevant, rather than seeing them as something that's alive and breathing and letting their mind take over the experience, and therefore closing them off. Because if we don't see the gods as some sort of element, which they kind of are, it's like, no, they don't need us. my dead grandfather doesn't need me. But what do? I bring the gifts and talents and things that I inherited from him to this earth. And what we're really doing in these relationships is called co-creation. And in the churches that I grew up in, that was the point. It wasn't just about going to church, what can you do for me? That was hammered into my head. You're not here to ask what you can do, you know, what God can do for you. That's not the point. It's like, well, this is a co-creation. It was nailed into my head. We're the hands and the feet. We are the go-tos, because they don't manifest themselves in the same ways. They're going to manifest themselves as a hurricane, as an earthquake, as something much huger than us. And so it's our interactions, it's our day-to-day, it's our influence on each other, and the love that is so prevalent and powerful, that makes things work in a harmonious way. It makes disharmonious things beautiful and harmonious. It allows for the yin yang to, you know, it allows just for more of the spectrum to participate. You know, that's part of getting out of duality consciousness. And it's not that the duality exists. I hate this idea that we can take out polarity. Like, no, 1, 2, and then 3. You know, like, it's just about including it in your co-creation and moving on from those polarized concepts. I'm not going to think of black and white all the time. I'm going to think about what we're making. Because we're doing art. We're taking those polarities and we're making something out of them. It's working with all those in-betweens. So I liked what you read, because that really made sense to me in the modern context. Because a lot of people in search for this one will often just dismiss, you know, and I'm all about the one, like that's great, but it will also dismiss the individuality that makes up that one. And if it wasn't important, then it wouldn't exist. So, you know, I thought that was really good. So thank you for that. It was a good reading.
Yeah.
Buddy. So much of what you read is buzzing on the vibes I'm buzzing on my channel right now. You know, polarity has that left brain propensity, and duality has a real nice harmonic to the right brain tendency, as the map is projected per Ian the Gilchrist. But something I think that we could all really partake of is, in what Rachel was saying there. I think a nice way to express it is the difference between theology and the theurgy. And the theology is reasoning about it, reading about it, talking about it, having the discussions and bouncing it around. But theurgy is don't talk about it, be about it, put it to work. And that is something only you can do, only in your individual way. And that's a nice thing about having a personal relationship in that. But yeah, theurgy is not theology. And we do theurgy. We're doing it right now with our art, right? You know, we're all doing our theurgy, but then we take a moment have a meeting of the minds and do theology, to talk and bounce it around. And I just want to say one aspect of the Euthyphro, as Socrates has been summoned to the ecclesia, he's on his way to present himself in court.
No.
Oh, the audio cut out.
Am I good?
Now you are.
Okay. Euthyphro is a doppelganger to Socrates. It's actually his own lookalike. And so when he counsels Euthyphro, he's speaking to his genetic likeness. And in a weird way, that's a mirror for him. And so that conversation is extra personal because of that similarity that they have. And they're both about to be caught up in court cases. So it's actually very meaningful to know that Euthyphro is like a doppelganger to Socrates, and he's trying to set this youth straight. And in a fun way, that gives more harmonic resonance to the ancestors that Socrates comes from. So that is a special conversation, very special just in that aspect. And I know we're going to wrap up soon, but I love that you also pointed out Aristotle's, I'm just going to call it the even temperament spell. I think that's a broad brush, and there's more accuracy than that we could say, but I think Aristotle was a great part of this even temperament spell, and circumcising people from their personal relationship with the personal pantheon, from their personal lineage, and trying to shove everybody into a box. So I love that you brought that up. And Chance, you were talking about the therapeutes. And, you know, something about those special chosen ones in those Essenes is they had to make a lot of room for their lifestyle to live as an aesthetic. You need to really be removed from everybody else because they will not understand your path, and they will even envy and resent your path if you engage that life meaningfully. If you're taking on suffering for your own theurgy, when you take on your own suffering, everybody automatically castrates you. It casts you out, castigates, and puts all the shadow on the shaman. And it's even like, oh, you think you're special because you got better connection to God? Well, I earned it. I took the suffering on myself. Don't hate me because I took the suffering onto myself. That's my burden. That has nothing to do with you. And there's a certain envying those individuals who have removed themselves. And I feel it. Like, oh, you think you're special because the gods are talking to you. Yeah, they are special because the gods are talking to them. The answer is yes, envy all you want. So, that's just kind of some of my feedback on that. But I love that the therapist's couch is the throne of the self-serving fantasy. The therapist's couch is the throne of the self-serving fantasy. That is really rewarding because Socrates was laid out on the couch. He was covering up the fear nature. And everybody's fear nature is personal to themselves. It's very personal to themselves. And you're really lucky if you find somebody else in the world who shares that fear and has overcome it and can draw you out beyond fear and into a harmony with somebody else, so that you're not an individual in that, and you're actually communing with somebody else who's gone through that, like Chance with his forks. He's like, oh, I've seen this before. I'm going to move it around. We're going to get you off the fear nature so you can get back onto the healthy path. So yeah, I always say that Zeus was the rapist. He was the rapist. And when you go in front of a psychologist or a therapist, you have to unveil yourself. You have to expose yourself to them. And that is such a sacred relationship. Yeah, man. It's such a sacred relationship. So and sometimes when they expose themselves, Chance, you're in there with the forks and you find out that there was a rape. There was a rape. It was the problem. And that it needs to be brought back to center with them. And so the word rape is kind of one of the most heinous transgressions there are. So it makes perfect sense to use the word rape as kind of an exaggeration, but that's to just make sure that you're getting every form of trauma between here and there accounted for in the term. There are many forms of rape. It's not strictly sexual. You know, somebody steals your car, you feel like you got raped. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of harmonize all those things. And I love the difference between theology and theurgy. You know, we all do. Yeah, this theurgy project we're doing today is such a blessing. It is such a blessing to share it with everybody.
Can never forget the same root word gives you rapture and rape. Same thing.
Yeah.
Snatch and carry away. Snatch and grab.
Here's a close up on my project. What do you guys got? You guys show your work.
I'll show my work.
Show your
I'll
work.
Take a picture of it. This is what I've been working on.
Yeah. Whoa.
Nice.
Bro.
Cute.
That's amazing.
Hardcore marker doodles.
Heck yes.
Yeah, we're
314. Look at the 314, yo. Oh yeah, buddy.
Yeah, I like to put little things in there.
That's powerful. Powerful. It's powerful.
Bonus points if anyone knows what hexagram numbers these are.
Which ones?
Oh, geez.
They're in the top left and the bottom right.
Dude, did you draw those? Like, did you do a theurgy to get those, or are those just inspired out of your mind?
No, I do. I cast some coins for these doodles. Oftentimes.
Is that water over earth or fire over earth in the bottom?
I think it's water over earth.
Okay.
And then let me just check my book. It's been like months since I started this one. I'm just finally picking it up again, so I forgot.
I've been working on remembering what they are, so it's like.
Good.
The other one would be fire.
Yeah, so the top left one we got 22, which is grace.
Yes.
Which is I just realized that's pretty cool. Gabe is aware. And the bottom one, bottom right, that's water over earth. Gives you number 8, which is gathering together, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, holding together, gathering together. I think that's why I got like the fishes there, like they're schooling up.
Am I seeing a ninja?
Yeah, my ninja.
There's no such thing as
my
ninjas.
ninja. Guys, this has been such a blessing. I'm so glad we're back on the flow stage. I'm so glad everybody could make it too.
Cool.
Yeah,
yep, we're gonna.
Got kind of far. I need to. I
big.
kind of messed up and didn't do like the right texture on the leaves. Like one strand makes a difference, so the texture could be a little bit thicker on the leaves and the stem, but it'll be all right.
Envy. So much envy. I love it.
Thanks for the $5 super chat, Jason. Appreciate that, man. I think we're gonna get my lovely wifey to show her rocks.
Yes.
I mean, you guys I was kind of showing them as I was working on them. But this one I can definitely do more, but it's got a cool base. And then the cool tone one.
Yes.
I'm kind of
wow.
Oh,
maybe we
man.
should go hide these in the garden somewhere, James.
That top right one is my favorite by far. That one's so cool.
Yeah, totally. I did all these ones, and then Chance.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is great colors too.
I love those. Those turned out so cool.
Thank you. She also did these ones too. They weren't in the same kind of style, but shout out to my mom.
Yeah, her mom came to visit and brought rocks for us to
Cute.
paint, and we all hung out and painted rocks together. It was super fun.
Yeah.
Wow, she made it 3D.
Yeah, she's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang,
Thank
that's
you guys
beautiful.
so much.
That's
Beautiful readings. Loved it. It's like a little, illuminating art session. I was problem solving dots, so I was kind of in the flow, but I loved it so much.
Yeah, same. Great readings, you guys. Good choices.
We got to
Mhm.
show Sarah's work. She's been hanging with us on the audience side and doing some stitching. Let's see here.
Oh yeah, she's made
Yeah,
Whoa. Check this out.
everybody out there, post your projects in the Telegram.
Yeah.
Let us see what everybody out there is doing.
Oh,
Ooh, nice.
cool.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Wow.
Wow.
That's so cool. I wonder how long that took you, Sarah.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this feels right. We should definitely do this more. Feels right. There was some astrologer Jen was listening to earlier today, and I don't remember the aspects, but there was some kind of like square going on where the action to take on the square was to do something creative and fun. And I was like, oh yeah, we're already doing it. I already signed up, making it happen. You guys are great. Great job, Sarah. That's super cool.
Do it. Bring back flow state. Let's do this once a week.
I'm down. I'll clear the
Let's do it
schedule.
once a week.
My schedule's a little too unpredictable on Fridays to necessarily guarantee it, but do what I can. If we keep getting in demand, it makes it fun.
Right on.
It might be evenings sometimes instead of daytime. Just depends on where like a tuning might line up, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
I love this. We're getting the band Back to the Future.
Oh, wait, we got one from Mick. I think there's another project coming into the Telegram. Very cool. We'll wait for that. I haven't done this kind of project for way too long. Feels good. Okay, here it is. All right. Ooh, big copper tree thing. Here it is. Yeah. I like
Oh,
the
nice.
diversity of crafts that were going on here. Nobody was doing the same type of project.
Oh, nice.
Totally. Awesome.
Oh,
Wire
Is that all copper? Like, there's not like a. It's not like a
Looks like
wrapped
it.
stick, is it?
It's a wrapped something.
Oh, it is wrapped. Yeah, yeah.
Mm, nice.
I like doing stuff like that. I like hands-on like woodworking stuff.
All right, guys. Well, it's been fun. See y'all
Yeah,
later.
thanks.
Thanks for hanging with us, audience.
Thanks, you guys. Have a wonderful
Thanks, guys.
weekend. Happy
Wow.
New Moon.
Thank you.
Oh, my puppy. Why is it?